Michael X's gift with a soundbite would make him the best-known black figure in British politics, and also the most controversial.
Yes, but what do you hope to gain by the sort of inflammatory speech that you made last night?
I do not make inflammatory speeches, I simply speak the truth. My brother Malcolm constantly have told me in the past that do nothing else but speak the truth. I speak the truth, and when I speak the truth, white people say this is inflammatory statements because they would like to see black men pretend and be Uncle Toms and aspire solely to go to the Queen's Garden parties. Well, I don't give a damn about the Queen's Garden parties. That's not where I want to go. I want to be free.
What struck me about Michael X, even though I completely disagreed with what he said, was when he was arrested and sentenced to 18 months for saying, if you see a white man with a black woman, kill him. And I thought, well, that's a bit silly, but I used to like to hear black people say things that were brave and bold, even though if it didn't make sense, because we was too quiet.
Michael X's RAS organization was attracting the interest not only of radical blacks, but also liberal whites. Their financial backing helped to set up the Black House, a black power commune in London. In 1970, John Lennon and Yoko Ono famously shaved off their hair and donated it to RAS. But despite the publicity Michael X generated for black causes, there was confusion even among his supporters about whether any real good was being achieved by his high-profile antics.
The press made him the militant activist he was. Michael never organized any large numbers of people in pursuit of any right, civil or human. Michael was a hippie with a commune always. And I was the prime minister of his commune at one time. And he had a remarkable capacity to raise money from the likes of John Lennon and Sammy Davis.
I remember he sent me a card saying, I think I'll make you foreign secretary of the RAS. You know, you couldn't tell in those days whether he was serious about what was going on or not serious, but actually he did have an impact on what was happening on the ground. But he was also somebody who got very carried away in terms of his own charisma.
By the end of the 60s, RAS was beset by internal arguments over money. Many of the huge cash donations from celebrities could not be accounted for. Amidst allegations of fraud and blackmail, the Black House closed down and Michael X disappeared. He would surface months later in his native Trinidad, a discredited figure.
He had no following, although the media portrayed that he had a following. He had no following at all. The media portrayed him to be a leader of the Black Power movement. He was not. The leader portrayed him as being fighting for black people. He was not, because we remember his past.
Michael X's past finally caught up with him when he was arrested in Trinidad for the murder of 2 of his followers. Michael X was found guilty of both murders and hanged.
Michael was reckless, careless, and I never knew what he believed. He was part of the confusion of his time.
Michael X, in fact, was just part of a radical anti-establishment movement which had swept through British society in the late 1960s. It was a time of student rebellion, liberal reform and social change. But opponents of change were finding a new voice, and one of its rallying cries would be a defense of white privilege. Since the end of the 50s, right-wing anti-immigration groups had been growing in strength, culminating with the formation of the National Front in 1966.
The problem, as I saw it, was that there was a threat to change the face of this country, to change its population from being Northern European to being something else. And I didn't want to see that happen.
The Front immediately made an impact at several by-elections. Their strongest support came from the Midlands. Industrial growth there had attracted thousands of West Indians looking for jobs, but a shortage of housing fed deep hostility against the immigrants.
I remember in Birmingham trying to address a meeting in the Bullring, and a woman came striding up. My Doreen's been on the housing list now for 10 years, but these immigrants come over here and they've got a place in 5 minutes. It's not bloody right. And that was the attitude of people. They didn't like what they see was happening.
When I first moved there in 1964, I was just married and looking for a house. And I can honestly say this is the first time that I personally encountered, people who said, we don't take any blacks there. And people shouted at us in the street when we were going around trying to find places. You see, myself and my white wife, you can imagine, she was the particular object of vile, remarks about mixed race couples and so on. So I had a very bad introduction to the West Midlands, I must say.
In 1964, race became a major factor in a British general election for the first time. Smethwick in Birmingham was thought to be a safe Labour seat, but it swung to the Conservatives after a controversial campaign which coined the slogan, "If you want a nigger neighbour, vote Labour." White unease over an influx of Asian immigrants into the West Midlands was to be exploited ruthlessly by one of the country's best-known politicians, Wolverhampton MP Enoch Powell.